Hello, Java Challenger. We are here again in the Java Rockstar Career series, and I have here a very important guest, which is Brian Vermeer. And Brian is a staff developer advocate at Snyk. I'm sure that you already heard about Snyk, and we're going to be talking about it in this interview. He's a Java champion. He is an experienced software engineer with over a decade in the field. He combines deep expertise in functional programming with a passion for cybersecurity. As a community leader, Brian serves the global Java ecosystem through his leadership roles with the Virtual Jug, Netherlands Java User Group, and DevSecOps community, and also the Full J community platform. And beyond technology, Brian serves as a captain and executive officer in the Royal Netherlands Air Force Reserve, where he oversees daily operations for over 700 military reservists in the 520 Squadron. He's also a dedicated Taekwondo master with a 4th Dan black belt and certification as an instructor. And also Brian makes his home in the Netherlands. So Brian, thank you so much for accepting the invitation to being here. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. I'm pretty excited to be on this series. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Amazing. So let's start then with the classic question I make to all my guests in this series. So Brian, can you share your career trajectory, highlighting the challenge you have overcome?
Absolutely. I mean, I first started in college doing software engineering. That was basically my major. I did software engineering, and basically we learned how to build programs back in the, what was it, early 2000s. After that, I was like, okay, I want to do more. I don't want to work yet. I don't want to get into the business life yet. So I went to university, did my master's, and the course was called software technology, which was more on functional programming and then compiler construction, everything on compiler analysis to build your own languages, to get more acquainted with how computer languages and logic works, which was super interesting, especially from the trajectory of how functional programming works versus how that used to work for me, because I did a lot of Java and C+ back in my college years. After that, I was looking for a job, and the first job was for a local as here in the Netherlands, company that did both hardware and software, and we built stuff with sensors that we can measure things like refrigerators for, say, hospitals that have vaccines and that kind of stuff to make sure that they're on par and that they get actively alerted. And I built, with my team, we built the platform. I was a junior engineer. I didn't know what I was doing, and I luckily had a mentor over there that helped me to overcome that fear, because I didn't do Java in a couple of years. I did some functional programming in Haskell, so I was stepping back into time to what used to be my Java knowledge. Luckily, with that mentor, it helped me get up to speed, and after that, it showed me that you need to know the concepts, and the language itself is more like syntax. Yes, you need to learn it, you need to learn APIs, but you need to grasp concepts first before you can actually start coding. So most of my sessions in early days were whiteboard sessions with the architects. It was a very small team, so we could brainstorm about how things were going on and how should we compartmentalize certain things. So that was a very nice school, because the team was only like 5 developers, and that was basically the company, or the technical part of the company, which was super interesting. After that, I went to another firm that did more consultancy-based work. So I was one of the senior engineers, and they put me into teams like in a regular bank or an insurance company. So basically, they seconded me to another company to be part of their team as an external, to either help them build a certain project or to be the extra pair of hands if they needed temporarily a senior developer. So I did that for a couple of years, working for the major banks, insurance companies, and the government here in the Netherlands, and learned to, basically polish my skills into different stacks. And that means not only Java, but also other parts, but also, as you probably all know, like Java has many versions, and some companies are on newer versions and some companies are on older versions. And you need to learn how to work with the business to make your statement because you are the technical expert. Fast forwarding after, say, 6 years of that, 5 years, 6 years of that, I was already speaking at conferences because I wanted to share my stuff. And I was like, hey, I think everything that I did, there is some piece of it that somebody wants to know, or like I can help people. I don't need to be the best one, but maybe I can help junior developers, for instance. So I went to a couple of conferences. They invited me to speak. That took a couple of years. And because of my network, I came in connection with one of the fellow Java champions, Simon Maple, who is based in the UK. And he basically hired me to join his team at Snyk, which was at that point a very small startup in the security space. And that was my start of a career as a developer advocate, not only programming, but also doing research, speaking more at conferences, making content, but also training developers to be more secure. That is in a nutshell what my trajectory was. And all of these steps, all of the transitions helped me to get new challenges and also helped me to change path a little from a full-fledged developer, full-time developer, to something more as a developer, as in not only coding, but doing more, like what you're doing yourself, teaching towards people in different ways. And in the meantime, I did a bunch of stuff in the community, which helped me both understanding community better, like how people work, how people are connected, but also how to give back. And that if you want to teach somebody about something, either technical or non-technical, you have to really know what you're doing. You're not just a user of a framework, for instance. You need to know what's behind that to actually explain it to people, to make them understand where the caveats are if they want to use it. So I think all of these facets, in a nutshell, help me become a better engineer and better tech person, I guess.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you started giving talks after 6 years of experience as a software engineer. How was this beginning when you first started giving talks?
So I think it was a little bit more than 6 years, to be fair, if I'm now counting out, say 8 years, whatever. Doesn't mean
8 years.
doesn't
Okay.
matter. That doesn't matter that much. But the thing was that I was visiting conferences, both nationally and internationally. Like I can vividly remember my first Java 1 back in 2000. I didn't even know, 2011, 12 or something like that.
That's great.
And I saw people there both as attendees and as speakers. And some of the topics were like, okay, they were very dear to me. Some topics were like, oh, I might know already something about it. Or I had a different opinion of things because of my own experience on things. Not saying that what other people do is bad, but there are different perspectives on things. So I decided to look at my own curriculum and what I did and what are interesting topics to share, and started doing that internally within the companies that I worked for, helping my colleagues, being on stage. Well, it wasn't really on stage, but being in front of a crowd, telling about what I know. And you don't have to be a master in everything. You just need to know what you're good at. And that's why I was moving forward. For instance, one of the talks in the beginning that I did was on how can we integrate functional programming concepts more in Java 8 and that point of view. That was a great, like Java 8, as most of you know, was the introduction of, for instance, lambdas, as in, higher order functions, basically, that you can provide to the Stream API as map and filter, which was a concept that is known for years within functional programming. But people were using it in very odd ways, different ways. So my talk was about, okay, not saying you should use it like this or that, but this was the intention, or this is the intention from a functional perspective, because I have that background. Why not teach people that or tell people that so they can understand better why it was used and what maybe the disadvantages of certain things are? Because if you understand that, and then you're like, oh, maybe that's not the best way. Maybe I could do it in a different way that's more energy effective or more memory effective. Or so think about a little deeper than just being a user of an API. So that's how I started out, which combining knowledge that I already had. And then it was basically other talks were on things that we created and why we took certain steps and how we did that and how we convinced the business and that kind of stuff. So basically based on my own experience, I did my first few talks, and then it's a lot of CFPs that you're handing in and a lot of declines. And at a certain point in time, I just got accepted at something, and then it started rolling out and getting more and more accepted, because then you're building up a resume on that, I guess.
Amazing. And you mentioned about CFPs. How do you deal with rejections when you submit a talk? Because that happens a lot.
That's an interesting one, because people say to me nowadays within the Java community, oh, you get accepted everywhere. First of all, that is not true. That is not true. There are still some conferences I did not accept. I did not ever get an acceptance of, or I'm still on my bucket list. And I am willing to try harder to get into that, because it's now something that I just want. But I will get declined all the time. And maybe some talks will get accepted, some talks will not. And how I deal with it, it's part of the game. It's part of the game. If you like within, for instance, the Netherlands Java user group, we're also conference organizers, so you understand both sides of the story. A conference owner or a program committee is there to create what for their community is the best program that is diverse and has all the subjects in there that they want to serve to their community, to their customers, or at least to the developers that are coming up. If my talk does not fit there, that might be coincidence. It might be that there's one person with the same talk that's better, or with the same subject that is better than there, or they just have enough already. Like if you only have 60 spots and you have 600 CFPs, you know that only 10% will get accepted. And that's part of the game. And you try the same talk, you can try it at another conference and maybe they accept you. So my thing is, if I get a rejection, it's like, okay, that's a shame. I might ask feedback depending on what the rejection is for, to get, hey, maybe it can be something like, hey, it was just there were so many requests, and yes, yours were good, but there were 3 or 4 others that were better. Fine. I take it. If there are specific things that they didn't like about my application, like, okay, sure, maybe I will change that next time. But I basically just take it and move on to the next one and try again, because the more you do it, the easier it gets, because I think the acceptance is not only, the topic needs to be good, don't get me wrong, but it's a combination of a good topic that is relevant and delivery. And for delivery, for a conference owner, it means they need to have trust in you. They need to have the trust that you can deliver to their audience. So the more known you are, yes, the better of a chance you have, because a conference owner will think like, okay, we've seen this person in the past and he or she can deliver that talk in a very convincing and energetic way. And we all know the examples in our community, like Dr. Venkat Subramaniam. Even if you give him to read the phone book, he will do it in a very active, energetic way. So that's what I mean with delivery. So, and you need to build up your resume on that. So if I get rejected, I will just move on to the next one. And that's how I started, and that's how I operate nowadays.
Yeah, and it's also like very good to have the perspective of being on the other side, right? Because then you create a lot more empathy, right? Because you know there are lots of talks and there is a whole context going on behind the scenes. So
absolutely, there's so much going on, and I have the same if I'm stepping outside of the Java bubble. Like in the Java bubble or in the Java conference scene, people quite know me, and I might get accepted easier. But if I go to, for instance, the NDC conferences, which were traditionally more .NET focused or JavaScript focused, and I'm talking about security, it's harder for me to get in because they don't know me, and it's fair. So I need to prove that I am relevant and I have a topic and a delivery that fits the needs of the conference owners or the conference attendees.
yes, that's true. Awesome. And you also mentioned something that's very important. You mentioned that you had the help of a mentor. So in your opinion, how important it is having the help of a mentor in your career?
I had several mentors in my career. As a junior, it was very important because you don't really know what the difference is between engineering school and real world, because at that point you get acquainted with not only developing, but also the business side of things, maybe, or what other forces they play in that universe. That's an eye opener. So learning to deal with that and having somebody as a team lead or something that can help you out, like, hey, let's focus on that one. Don't mind what they're saying, like these easy things, or learn what the stakes are in business. That is one thing that's interesting. Another one is like every step in your career brings challenges, and having somebody there to talk about it, even if you're uncertain, can just shine a light if your challenge is, or your fear might be valid, or it's something that you're overthinking. And sometimes I'm overthinking, as in, oh man, they just want this or that, and it might not be the case. I just misinterpreted things. Or for instance, I'm focusing on the wrong things in my work life. Like learning what is relevant and what is not, especially if you want to grow.
Yeah. Having a mentor is essential. I had many mentors. I still have many mentors, and definitely helped me to grow exponentially in my career. So
Yeah.
it's like the mistakes a mentor did, like they will help you avoid them. So we reach to our goals a lot more quickly instead of
Yep.
making all the mistakes. And,
I
a
absolutely
mentor,
agree.
yeah, a mentor is like taking a shortcut, because a mentor will say, hey, go that direction. Because sometimes we go in zigzags, right? We go but with a mentor direction, we can just, okay, this is the way. So
A mentor will not only show you the way, but also explain you why, and
exactly.
show you what is going, or why you should take that way, or why that is one of the paths to go. And hey, sometimes you might be stubborn and you take another way that might work. Doesn't mean the mentor is 100% right. So that's your way. That's fine. But in most cases, you at least know in concept what you need to think of and need to do, and not making the same mistakes as your mentor did, or understanding your own mistakes. Like, why didn't this work? That is also one. Sometimes you do something wrong and you're like, why did this happen? And if somebody can help you explain it because they have more oversight of things, then you know why certain consequences come with certain decisions. And that is very interesting.
Yeah. You mentioned one point here that for me, I feel it's important to discuss, because if we want to evolve in our careers or have a business, like anything we want, we need to make connections with people, right? And you mentioned something very interesting to me. You said you have to understand how people work and how people are connected. Can you expand this point, like in your perspective?
Yep. Well, the easy answer is it depends from person to person and group to group. Let's say, as a developer, I like to stay digital. I like to be behind my screen. I like to develop. I like to have a clear story that I need to develop this and this needs to be the outcome. But if I develop for a company, how do you say that? The demands might be a little bit more fluid. As in, does the business partner know actually what he wants? Should I ask him? Should I talk with the person to understand what they really want and need? Because if they say, I just need a button that does this, like, okay, the problem is not, do you want the button? What is actually the problem that you're trying to solve? Let's go to a deeper level. And if I, as a developer, understand it, I'm not a code monkey anymore and just creating that button that does X, but trying to actually help people. And to learn how to help people, you need to understand folks. Some people will act better if you talk to them face to face because they feel more open. Some people are easier to write it out and to put it on paper. And that depends on things like, where are you based? How is your style of communication? But also, what is your background? Do you have a technical background or not? For instance, you're originally from Brazil, but if you see that people in South America communicate in a very different way than people in the United States or people in Western Europe. Some people
Yes.
are very direct, some people are indirect. There's a lot of intonation in certain languages.
Yes.
If I might be too direct in a certain language to a certain person, they might find it offensive. Or if I'm not direct enough or asking the question, I will get some business talk around it, and I still don't have my answer. So you have to know what people come from, what they do, how they learn to get the best result, because in the end, people want something. And if we figure that out, and that's communication within teams, that is communication from teams to upper level or to levels below, if we learn how to work with each other, what our caveats are, then we have, I think the communication skills are one of the most important assets that you need to have and you need to run with. If you run in one country, it's probably already easier. But that then again, it depends on the background of the people, where they come from. They might be more passionate about things. They might be maybe more religious, more whatever. Everything can play a role. So you need to know the person a bit to feel how to get the needs out of that person to act upon it. And I think that is one of the things I've learned specifically when started in Snyk. Because before that, I worked in the Netherlands, and now I work internationally with folks from all over the world, with all types of different cultures. And I think I say one thing, and they might interpret it as something different, and that can be a crucial thing.
Yeah, because sometimes you're discussing about the business requirement, and
Yep.
then you think you understood the business requirement, and then bugs are created. But that's very interesting. There is a book actually about that. It's called The Culture Map.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Good Culture Map from Aaron Meyer. That was a book that after I was reading it, I understood a ton of things more to how to communicate that. I can give you one example of that. One of the first reports I wrote around security and container security, say one of my American coworkers, well, basically one of the managers higher up, that was all praise, like, oh, this is amazing, you did a great job, that, blah, blah. And then it was minor little thing you may want to look into. So minor little thing you may want to look into. That felt very small to me. And then it was a lot of praise. Oh, this is also good. This is also great. So they put it into the feedback sandwich, but they made it very little. But that's a typical American way of giving you feedback in such a way it doesn't harm you. They don't want you to feel upset, but they want you to change that. And I was like, I'm from the Netherlands. We're very direct. Minor little detail, like they're making it smaller. I was like, okay, if it's a minor little detail and I do not really agree with you, I just leave it. That was not a good thing. Trust me. So I had to figure out how that worked. And the book, like the Culture Map by Aaron Meyer, did help me a lot onto how different people communicate, how hierarchies work in different countries and different cultures to get the most out of things. It's totally different if I talk to somebody from the Middle East, if I talk to somebody from Spain or Portugal, or even if I talk to somebody from the US, and maybe even I have colleagues, for instance, in Israel. They have different mindsets and different ways of working and different ways of communicating. And if you don't know, you might get tricked by literal words. If an Englishman says to you, that is interesting, it can mean very different things. It might be, it's like interesting, might be it's not really good, or hey, that's really interesting. That might mean really good. So intonation and context mean so much, and you need to know how to read between the lines.
yeah, so I think between the Dutch, like you and another Dutch person, you prefer to be more direct.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so this is like in our culture, it's like showing respect, right? Like you are being direct, but like not necessarily you are offending the other person. It's just the way you handle things. Like it's just say, okay, that's a problem, that's it.
Exactly. In our culture, for us, it means like, okay, we want to be effective and efficient. So you just say what you mean, and not to harm the person, but to maybe criticize the way of working. It's not you personally. It's more of, we shouldn't be doing it that way. I think that way is better. And people might feel a little harmed by that. It's like, oh, if they're very close to the process, or they feel like they're personally attacked. And for many of the Dutch, it's like, that's okay. Like, we don't take it personally, but that's give and take. We know how to get it. But if you go across borders and you say that to somebody else, that might not have the same working, and you might harm yourself more than you actually gain something from it.
Definitely. Like in Brazil, we are a very indirect culture as well. And our way to give feedback is very similar from what you said in the US.
Yeah.
So like the Brazilians are not direct at all.
No, and that's between difference in culture, but also difference in languages. Like The amount of words in Spanish or Portuguese are a multitude of the amount of words in English, or the other way around. Like there is a lot of, like, I cannot speak Portuguese or Brazilian Portuguese. I can speak a little bit of Spanish, but I know there are so many things like how do you say it in what example, with what intonation, that can mean a different thing at all. So you need to know how to, where the people are from and what their background is to get, it's not good or bad, but if you want to be effective and grow, I think that is one of the most important parts to know.
Yeah. So basically, what's your style of communication? You adapt to each culture?
I try to learn to know the person, as in it can be through a call, it can be through Slack, depending on where the people are based. But trying to know a little bit about the person and have a feeling around that. And the more you do it, the more of a feeling you have. And then you can find out different types of people and try to have an open and honest communication on that. And also saying what sometimes saying like, okay, I might be little bit direct. And if you think I am direct, call me out. Like, let's do this in private and let's stay open to each other. But also, in some cases, tailor to certain people, not being super direct, but fuzz it up a little more. Like, hey, hope this email finds you well, which for a Dutch person will be like, what are you doing? But it might be considered very polite on the other side of the world. You know, if I'm not doing that, they find me impolite and they will not listen to my asks or even dismiss it. So simple things.
Interesting. Yeah. I personally don't like very much those like, oh, I hope this email finds you well, because it seems that it's kind of an automatic message.
Sure. Oh, that definitely is for this one. But just to give you an example, like sometimes
Okay.
it works to adapt yourself a little bit,
Yeah.
and instead of demanding or saying things, maybe asking things why somebody did that. Hey, I noticed you did this. I don't really understand how this works. Can you explain it to me? Instead of I
Nice.
don't think this works, you should change it. That's a whole different level, but you mean the same.
Yes, that's very interesting. Like this is kind of also being using politics, right?
Sometimes
Like
yes. Yes.
because like otherwise just the way you communicate, you might create enemies unnecessarily.
Yes, unnecessary enemies. Like sometimes you probably will create enemies in one thing because people don't
Oh
like
yeah.
that. That's fine. That's natural. But unnecessary communication disruptions can do a lot of harm.
Yeah. I remember when I was one of the previous companies I was working for here in Dublin, like we had cultures from many countries. We had people from Italy, from Germany, from Ireland, from Romania. Yeah, many people, like many different cultures. And I remember that when there was the director, the principal software engineer, when I was in the meeting and there was a tech lead from Germany, like he would be very direct to the director, and I
Yep.
would say, "Oh my God, really?" And like it was like very direct in front of everyone. Like in Brazil, we would never do that. And I think, well, I don't know if most cultures wouldn't be that direct in front of everyone, but in Brazil, definitely not. So is a culture thing. It does that happen in the Dutch culture as well?
It does happen because it's if the discussion is open and people will be asked for their opinions, they will give you the opinions. But you should be the other way around. If you ask a Dutch person for their opinion, they will be very straightforward with you. They can still be friendly, but they will be straightforward and they don't sugarcoat things. You will understand what they mean. So that might be a little bit like the Germans, quite direct. And then it's up to the person itself. How direct do you want to be? How almost offensive do you want to be? How, like, and there are so many shades of gray in that, how you can do that. But I think that is one of the things to get yourself in a company, to get yourself liked or not liked, and therefore maybe eligible for instance promotion or a raise. This can influence. If it's a German company and everybody's like that, you might be the one that needs to adapt and need to take that criticism and give it in the same way. But if it's an international company, you need to learn to work your way around it and
Exactly.
maybe ask more than you give, if you know what I mean. Like ask for why people do this, and they might give you a straightforward answer, and learn to know how the people work.
Yes, because for me it was a culture shock
Yep,
when I
I can.
saw the German developer being that direct, almost at the point of being offensive, I said, wow. I was thinking,
that's also the question. Like, was it meant offensive? As in,
no,
probably
I don't think so. I think
that's what I'm.
it's cultural thing. It wasn't meant to be offensive, but the way the communication, the way he communicated came across like that.
Yep.
But I know the intention wasn't to offend.
So in a company, if you want to work effectively and efficiently, I think you should take both ways. If somebody is what you think quite offensive, it's like, okay, let's leave it now. Let's get back into a one-on-one together. Like, hey, you were very direct on that. And to me, it felt offensive. But how did you mean it? Because I think definitely in a German company, it's how it works. In a Dutch company, it's how it works.
How it works, yes.
And everybody knows it's not direct or offensive. It's just we want to get this thing as effective and efficient as possible in the least available time. So as soon and as effective as possible. So sugarcoating communications is not our style. But if you want to work your way up, you need to take care of that. You need to be aware at least of that so you can act according and appropriately.
Yes. And the Irish culture is also like that. They sugarcoat lots of things. They're not a direct culture at all. Kind of the Brazilian culture. So let's talk about security.
Yep.
So what security concepts should a senior Java developer master in your opinion?
I think in general, security is getting way more important than it feels way more important than it was 10 years ago. Because 10 years ago, we were building something and we basically said we did agile, but we still had pillars of teams. Like we just threw it over the wall and like, you fix it. You put it into production and there's a security team that takes a pen test on it. But nowadays, that's not possible anymore, specifically with continuous integration and continuous development or continuous delivery. Yeah, it might be whenever my feature is done, I push it, the pipeline runs, and it's already deployed into production. That means that pen testing, for instance, is impossible. Pen testing will take time. So you still need to do that. Don't get me wrong, but it's a good thing if you as a developer are aware of security concepts. And I don't mean just authentication and authorization. Yes, you need to do that. But also like some code concept as well. I think that everybody knows what a SQL injection is, I hope. If not, look it up, know what it is and how to prevent it. But also how file overwrites work. How, for instance, in Java, how serialization can be a very bad thing if it was happening in the wrong way, like how the concepts of certain languages work. So you can already try to prevent that when you are developing these things. Like when I make a decision of, okay, I make this method or I make this class and I do it in this flow, I make that decision, but that decision should be conscious, as in it should be effective, it should be memory efficient, it should be scalable, but it should also be secure. And I know that many of the developers back in the day, but also myself, back in engineering school, security was not really a real topic, if you know what I mean. I didn't know what the path traversal override was until I was working for Snyk. Now I know and now can explain to everybody. These kind of concepts are one thing. Next thing is like, hey, we're using a lot of other components, either components from libraries or frameworks, or maybe Docker containers or something like that. How up to date are these? Is it like, hey, it still works, I don't need to touch it, but what if one of the libraries that your library is using several layers deep has a vulnerability? And it's actually a vulnerability that can be exploited right away. Maybe you should be able to fix it. At least you should be able to find it. But can you fix it? Because if I'm 10 versions behind on Spring Boot, say I'm still on Spring Boot 1, and I need to update to Spring Boot 3 point something, good luck. That will take me weeks, maybe months to get all my libraries up to speed so that I can fix that one critical vulnerability. Yeah. So I think in that light, we need to at least be aware of things, and we need to know how certain vulnerabilities work. And the easiest way to go there is to start with things like the OS top 10. And it might be very boring, I know, but know of these concepts, because it's just like we used to learn, we back in the day, I used to learn how certain patterns work to develop certain things, design patterns, for instance. This should be part of your basic knowledge as an engineer, that you can spot it both in a code review or while you're programming it, like, oh, this might be, why didn't I do a check on what is coming in from the user? Should I sanitize it or validate it in such a way? If we do that as developers already, and obviously we have tooling to scan that and help you with that. But in general, if you can do that from the beginning, you already catch probably a ton of silly mistakes before they hit the pipeline, or maybe not even get spotted in the pipeline and they came into production because nobody tested it until the next pen test, and the next pen test might be every 3 months. Well, good luck if you're deploying 3 times a day. So security is just as important as nowadays scalability, maintainability. All the abilities are just as important. Security should be one of the major pillars, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. Because, for example, I worked for Equifax in 2017, and they had one of the biggest breaches, right? So they lost $500 million. So,
Yep. And it was when you knew what the payload should be. Basically, you could just insert a payload with a curl request. And because of that payload, you could spin up, well, it's like serialization. You could spin up a new runtime or a new, how do you say that? A new process builder and spin up a new process and therefore do arbitrary code executions. The Equifax one was one of the famous ones. Just like a couple of years ago in 2021, the Log4j one, which everybody talks about. But these were the ones that came into the news because it impacted so many people at the same time. And these were CVSS 10s, basically highest score measurable for a vulnerability. There are so many 9s and 8s that do not get into the national, international news, but they can harm your system, and you should be aware of them, and you should be able to assess them or be able to ignore them if you really know that it's not hitting you. But then you need to know what you're doing, and you need to know what kind of other libraries you're using. So it's complicated. But having some basic knowledge around that makes you a better developer in general, in my opinion.
Definitely. So basically, the main concepts are the OWASP top 10.
Yeah, start with that. Start with the OWASP top 10.
Authentication, authorization, vulnerabilities, understanding what are the vulnerabilities from your libraries.
Yeah, make that an integral part of your development lifecycle. I mean, we do unit tests. Hopefully everybody creates unit tests to make sure that all your parts of your system are tested before you go into production. Why not do the same with security tests? And it's getting more interesting when we are including LLMs and AI agentic systems in our system, because a simple SQL injection can be cascaded into context poisoning for your LLM, and therefore your LLM might trigger a function that does something that you don't want to happen at that point.
Wow.
So all these kind of things are connected to each other, and the basics are still so important, like input validation. If that is not done, people will be able to, for instance, create weird prompts in your agentic system, and therefore might trigger MCP calls or tools that are connected to your LLMs. So it's not something from the old days, and now with AI it's solved. I think it's all connected, and we already have examples of that.
Definitely. And so you became a developer advocate, and I'd like to know, what would you recommend senior Java developers to do to eventually become a developer advocate as well?
I think it's good that you started with senior developers. I think as a developer advocate, you should have an engineering background, a good engineering background, because basically you're talking to developers. And if you say you just graduated university, you don't have any experience yet in what real development problems are, like your everlasting CI pipeline that breaks all the time because of flaky tests. Every developer knows what that means and how frustrating that is. Like, these kind of things you need to know. If you want to continue, first find out if that is the thing that you want. Like, what are your spots that you like? Are you just a person that likes to program and create things? Maybe developer advocacy is not your thing. So that's also a choice. Maybe you want to grow into, for instance, a more research R&D kind of team that you can experiment with new stuff. But figure out what your weak spots are and what your strong suits are. For me, talking in public is not a big problem. I like that. And I think I can share that. I think my English is quite well, so I can do that internationally. And I took that as an opportunity to grow and to share my knowledge, to make a big problem into a very digestible topic, that people can relate to. And that's how I started. And that's the way I operate. But for instance, if you say like, okay, this is nerve-wracking, I don't want to be on a stage with 20 people or 100 people in front of me, maybe that's not your thing. Maybe you should focus on other things, creating videos or looking into writing or certain things like. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the only thing. It can be next to development. I think every developer advocacy job is different. I'm still developing. Every now and then, I'm still contributing to tools or to open source projects or doing research on things and helping people within the company for the actual product. Next to that, I'm doing outreach to the community to learn them more about security, how you can integrate security in that. And I'm very passionate about it. So I think that is a key pillar. You should be passionate about the things you're doing. Don't go and work for a company. You're like, I don't know, it does something with cryptocurrency. It pays a lot of money. That will not last. Pick something that you're passionate about that you think like, okay, this is interesting. I want to learn more about that and go from there and see what kind of roles are there. I just rolled into this. It was luck, but also it was because I know the community. I built up a network and they asked me to do this. So therefore somebody saw something in me and therefore I landed into this job. So I think it starts with building up a network and talk to people around different jobs and what are you doing and how does that work? Is that something for me? Yes or no? And then it's a lot of trying, a lot of failing, but also being determined that if you want something, you might be able to get it.
Yeah. So you mentioned an important point that, yeah, in our lives, obviously luck plays an important role.
Sure.
But like you said, you were taking actions towards becoming a developer advocate. So it wasn't only luck, it was your actions. Then, like, there was a bit of luck, obviously, with some connections, some key connections. Then say, hey, Brian, I need you to work for my company because I see that you're giving amazing talks and you're knowledgeable and I want you to work with me. So it wasn't only luck. I just want to clarify that because this is a very important point for anyone who wants to grow in their careers, right? They need to take action. They need to make it happen. And then luck will help you. Like basically what you did, you increase your luck to the exponential, right?
I think that's a great way. Like, yes, eventually you need a little bit of luck, but you raise your chances. Like, do you buy one lottery ticket or do you buy 1,000 lottery tickets? The chances are better that you win something if you buy 1,000, right? And this is by building up your network, by building up being knowledgeable, by, for instance, being active in a community. And it also meant for me when I was still full-time engineering, it means evenings, weekends, in some cases, to spend time at meetups, to talk with people, to go to a conference. Yes, back in the day, I had to take days off to speak at a certain conference. Why? Because I think it was good for my career, or at least I liked it. I took joy out of that. And that exponentially grew into growing my community or growing my network. And therefore, my network helped me into getting this job. So you are in charge of the odds of your own luck. You can increase your own luck. I totally agree with that. Exactly. And I think I had this conversation with somebody else. Like, if you just work 9 to 5 and do the job that you're supposed to do, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to really take that step up, you also need to invest some of your own time and energy in it to get to that next point. Because not like, oh, you're such a nice guy, let's get you to that point. Because some people are there, but the chances are that you won't have that luck. But if you take some more effort and some more time out of your day to visit people, to go to mentoring classes, to find a person that can help you, you need to actively take action to get most of that done.
Exactly. Totally agree with you. And we briefly discussed about your day-to-day work, like a staff developer, advocate at Snyk. But can we go a bit deeper into that? How is your day-to-day work?
That is that depends on my day. Really, I don't have a clear schedule. Like, we have tasks and things that we want to do within our teams, but it's also more what comes up, honestly. Like what I'm currently doing, I'm looking a lot into, okay, what's happening into the AI space and how does that reflect on security for specifically developers. And there are a lot of crossover edges that I'm covering now. So if I think that is interesting, I'm writing a case for that. Like, hey, this might be interesting to review, to make a talk out of my, but also maybe we can cover this in some of our products, yes or no. So this all cross interferes. It can also be that in some cases, one of the folks in the sales teams calls me and is like, Brian, we need some help with a certain customer because they need some more training for their developers to be not just to use our tools, but also like to be secure in general. So that's also one of my pillars. Just 2 weeks ago, somebody from one of the teams called me as in, hey, you know a lot about Java and how Maven works. We want to achieve this and that, but we don't really understand how the Maven cycle works because we don't have so much. We've seen the documentation, but we don't really understand certain things. How can we solve this? So I'm a subject matter expert on that, as in within the Java ecosystem for my company. So they will ask me about all sorts of things. Sometimes I know the answer. Sometimes I need to research the answer. But because of my network, I have people around that I can ask. I have people that work actively on Maven. I know people that work actively on other projects, and therefore I am the best person to ask that. So I'm helping teams. I'm doing research. I am creating blog posts and videos, but most of my time I'm also making that into talks and travel around to speak at conferences because that works for me and my situation with my family. So that's a deliberate choice. One of my other colleagues who has a couple of little kids, he works mostly digitally and creates most of our YouTube assets because he's really good at that in the digital space, but he doesn't want to travel a lot. So it depends on what you want, what you can, and how that fits the company's needs. And we found a mode around that. So I don't have, my typical day starts with coffee. That's the only thing I know.
That's great. And how many countries do you travel during the year in average?
Well, let's say I travel most of Europe and most of Europe and sometimes to the US. I try to minimize my trips to the US because I don't like to be in an airplane for 14 hours or something like that. But the amount of countries, 10, 12, I don't know. It can be a lot.
Yeah.
But it depends. I try to stay as much as possible connected to Europe, as in larger Europe. So UK and Ireland as well, mainland Europe, Nordics, but also Southern Europe, and sometimes a little bit towards things like Morocco or Turkey or something like that. Like that area. I try to avoid very long trips because it takes a lot of my time. It takes a lot of time to get there, and it needs to be valuable. As in, if I'm speaking at a conference and doing a workshop over there, if I feel that it's something that helps me and help the company to get more of the statements out of, hey, how to be secure, then it's a no-brainer if it fits my schedule because there are so many other things working around. So yeah, it can be quite difficult. It can also be quite busy sometimes.
Yeah. And how many talks a year do you give in average?
Ooh. Well, let's say that's one of the things. If you want to start speaking, don't do a talk just once. Repeat your talk at different conferences and different meetups because it's a different crowd. People that go to a meetup or a conference in Barcelona, Spain, will not be the same people that go to a conference in Dublin or in London or in Amsterdam. So you can reuse that talk and maybe adapt it a bit. So make it every time, make it a bit better. So typically I have 3 or 4 active subjects where I talk on every year. And I do, how many sessions do I do? So say conference talks, including workshops and meetups a year, ballpark 30 or something like that. It can be a bit more, can be a bit less, but let's take that ballpark of 30 a year.
Amazing. So, and I like how focused you are. So you create like workshops and talks?
Yeah.
3 talks approximately.
3, 4 talks. It depends. Some talks can evolve and we use the basic research on that and let that evolve over time. But most of the time, currently I have 2 talks and a workshop actively, and I have a talk from last year that sometimes people still want to hear. So 3 active talks and a workshop.
Yeah.
And most of the times they want now a crossover about LLM and security and how that works specifically, for instance, for Java developers. If you create with Spring AI or LangChain4j or something like that, is one of the most popular ones that I'm currently doing. And also that one is changing every single time because new stuff comes out and you want to include new features and that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. And how do you tweak your talk? For example, when you go to another country, like how do you know how to deliver this talk to them?
That, like, there are a few things. Like, one thing you have to be very careful with is humor and jokes. Jokes might work in one country and the other not. So that's one thing. Like, be very careful around that. But I think in general, I am in quite a niche. There are not a lot of people that do hands-on security and trying to show certain breaches and hacks on stage in the developer community. So I'm just trying to improve every time I get feedback from either conferences or people like, oh, that was interesting, or they came up with a question. It's like, okay, maybe I can include that, or maybe I can highlight that during my talk. That will be input for me for the next edition of that talk. And then
Nice.
try to tailor it a bit to the country where I am, if applicable. Sometimes you don't have to, and sometimes you need to, depending on what the conference is. If it's a conference for junior developers, it's a little bit, you have to explain it a little bit more than for seniors or staff or principal developers. I can expect that their base knowledge is larger and they know more about certain topics than junior developers. So that's more of like, what is the level of this conference or meetup, and do I need to explain more, or let people ask questions? In some cases, sometimes I need to deviate a little bit to give them the information that they're looking for, because in the end, you're not doing it for, I'm not doing it for me, I'm doing it for the audience that is there, because if they're not there, I am useless, right?
Yeah, that's a very important concept. Always to focus on your audience, because you are there giving the talk because there's an audience.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. And let's talk about Snyk now. So for those who are not familiar with Snyk, can you explain the benefits of using it?
Well, so we are a security company. Well, not security, just a traditional security company. We create tooling specifically tailored for developers to help you being secure down the road, and not only in your pipeline. Because what you see in most cases, that for our competitors or something like that, they have tools that can help you in the pipeline, and sure, but most of the times when I submit my code or commit my code and push it to my master branch or main branch, it works. And if I then find out that one of my libraries is vulnerable, I need to update it. I need to go back to the drawing board, change change to that new library that might break API, needs to do some rework. I want to know that on the spot. So from the beginning of time, or from the beginning of the company, we try to focus on not the security experts, but on the users, the developers. And I think we are one of the few, maybe one of the only ones, that has their tooling set up in so many ways that you as a developer can do that on your local machine, in your IDE, together with maybe nowadays coding assistants, and to integrate that as a workflow. And after the fact kind of checkup, yeah, we can do that as well, and you still need to do that. But I can help you. We can help you already while you're developing. And I think we started that from the beginning, which means our tools are tailored to do that, and not, how do you say that? Retrofit it afterwards. A lot of the competitors that tried to do this, it was like, oh yeah, then we created an IDE integration and it doesn't really work, or it doesn't really integrate, or something like that. Like, our focus was always on the developer. The developers are our main goals, and therefore I think we're doing a good job to make a developer's life easier in the form of doing security scans for them.
Nice. So basically, developers, like while they are coding, they can see ahead of time what library, what dependency has a vulnerability, and then they can correct it on the spot.
Well, that's one thing, but also, like, okay, you might have multiple vulnerabilities, but what should you do? Like, I can also put them out. Maybe you just need to update one major dependencies, like maybe it's just your Spring parent that you need to upgrade from 3.4 to 3.5. I'm just saying something. And then you fix all of the stuff below. That is something that we give you as an actionable result. Next to that, we already scan your code, your custom code, while you are writing it, and you will like, hey, like a warning sign or thing like, this might lead to a deserialization attack, or this might lead to a SQL injection, or this. So it will help you while your code, because Probably when you are developing something, you're like, okay, I need to solve this. And you have the concepts in your mind. Like, I need to have a caching library. I need to have this. And then you're not paying attention to what version or what, like, okay, it works. Like, let me make it work first and then we make it pretty, right? That's in a lot of ways how people are working. So you're thinking about building, not so much about how to break this because you're still building it. But if we can already point out like that, maybe there and maybe there, you could use a little help. And then you can already determine like, okay, is this valid or not? Because you're in that process of designing it or coding it. And sometimes you might be like, yes, that's true. Yes, that is true, but it's not really important right now because whatever reason. So you can judge at the right point instead of after the fact.
Yeah. So, and what happens if there is a library that is the latest version and this library has a security vulnerability? Like, is there something a developer can do in that case?
That's a very good question. The question is if it's the library itself or a transitive dependency. So let's say you have a Spring Boot starter, and that one is vulnerable because one of the libraries that Spring Boot starter is using, that is vulnerable. And you're saying like, okay, but I cannot just change the Spring Boot starter because we're bound to the parent. Sure. Well, then you might be able, if there is already a newer version of that lower level library that, I don't know, does YAML parsing or something like that. I'm just making things up now. Maybe there's already a newer version for that, and you can fix that yourself in, for instance, using dependency management in Maven or something similar in Gradle. You can switch it out. And we can already point it out like, hey, we cannot already automatically create a fix for you because there is no newer Spring Boot parent available yet. But we mark it that this is vulnerable. The other thing that you can do is either ignore it, depending on if the library or the transitive library, the use case for it is not really applicable to you. So it depends on your use case and your threat level. Or what you can do is sometimes you can ignore the library as in don't pull it in. Don't pull it in. Do you really need this library? That's the other question that you need to do, because in a lot of cases, we have a ton of libraries and frameworks in our system that we use out of convenience or we don't even use, but they're part of our class path. The question is, do you actually need it? Are there replacement libraries for that? And then the best thing is, if it's a thing that you really need, it is vulnerable, maybe you can create a fix yourself and post it as an open source request or as an open source helpful thing to the maintainers. If you find out that there is and there's nothing yet, if it's not yet reported, report it in a good way, as in don't publicly publish it. But if it's already published, 9 out of 10 times people are already working on it. If it's a really big vulnerability, there might already be a version out or an early access version out of it. And you can judge from that, like, hey, what is the problem? Is that implicated in my application as well? And then you can make measurements that either do it yourself or use the early access build or something like that, or maybe not use it at all and build it yourself from scratch. In some cases that works. But all of these things depend so much on how your application works and what is the threat level you are trying to mitigate. Because in some cases, it's more work to do it and not actually gain something from it. So it's not let's say, you don't have to be at 0 vulnerabilities. You have to be aware with your security team, okay, what is important to us? I think it starts with that. Like, what are we trying to solve?
Yeah. Is there a kind of blacklist of vulnerabilities? Like those vulnerabilities could destroy the whole company? Because like I remember that like in some projects I worked with, there was like quite a few vulnerabilities. And because we didn't have much time to work on them, they were kind of there.
If we're talking about vulnerability in libraries, definitely. What you can do if you scan it with our tooling, what we can do is we give you a score based on the likelihood that this thing is used, on if there are exploits available already, if this was one of the things that was in the news or not, like how many posts are there around it, but also is it reachable? Like, is there a path through that particular method in that vulnerability or in that library that is vulnerable, that it can actually be executed, yes or no? So it needs some analysis. We can give you a approximation score on that, which was
nice.
it's never a full 100% guarantee, but that already gives you more like, okay, where do I get started? These are the ones that have high priority, and these are the ones that have lower priority. So we can give you prioritization scores. Let's call it that. That's not the official name, but scores on that, like, hey, which one should you take care of it first? And on the other hand, which ones are the easiest to fix? Because if they're easy to fix, you shouldn't leave them hanging.
Yeah, that's amazing. Snyk, because you can find the vulnerabilities while you're coding. I remember that one of the previous companies I was working for, I was using a horrible software called HP45. You probably know it, but I think it's a very old software. Basically, you would have to run HP45. I know that the company I was working for, they were spending a lot of money in the software. And like when you would run the HP45 software, you would have to wait like for 1 hour and a half, sometimes 3 hours, sometimes 5 hours to running the whole code. And HP45 wasn't even able to scan the try with resources feature from Java 7. So it was so old, so like it was horrible. And that time we had already, I think we already have like at least Java 11, right? As a long-term version. And like HP45, like it's a clunky software. It takes so much time to run. I don't know nowadays how it is, but it was a horrible experience. I didn't like it at all because I had to use the old Java features to fix the OWASP vulnerabilities.
Yep.
And as you're saying, it's like miles ahead, like it's far ahead of those kind of like clunky software. Like,
and I mean, no security scanner will be perfect. Let's get that. Like every security scanner has false positives or false negatives. But the thing is, as a developer or a designer of a piece of software, you know what's going on. You know what you're building. You know who you're building it for and where it runs. So at least with the information that you get, you can make actionable and knowledgeable decisions. So don't take the list of you should do this as a bucket list of doing this. No, take this list as information. It's like, okay, sure. Let's see what we should do about it. And that depends on your use case, on your things. But it needs to be, and that's what you're saying, it needs to be snappy. It needs to be reasonably quick to get the results. And you don't want to wait for 3 hours to get the results out. And I think we are pretty good at that. And we can do that at different stages, both on your local machine, while you're coding, or while you run a CLI job, or maybe you want to connect it to your Maven build, whatever fits you, because I don't want to demand how you need to work, because everybody works in a different way and everybody wants to be effective in his or her way. But have that already early in the life cycle will help you prevent silly vulnerabilities accidentally getting into production, or that you need to do a lot of rework when you find it out at the point you actually want to deploy, and then somebody says, sorry, you have these issues. And you're like, if I would have known before, I would have fixed it right away, but now I need to redo a bunch of stuff. And I think by catching it early, you will save a lot of frustration if you're using the stuff in the right way.
Yeah, and I really hope that you take the market for the fintech companies, because like most fintech companies, they use those horrible softwares, and like it's clunky. It takes hours. It was so frustrating. Like for me, it would be a lot better to use Snyk, and just like while I'm coding, I could see all the vulnerabilities, and I could see the score of my code. That would be a lot better. Like it would save so much time. Like definitely, like you should, take over this fintech market. It's huge. My God. Like, I don't know who make the decisions to buy those like HP45 or any kind of software that doesn't work very well. So I think there is a huge market for Snyk, because my life would be so much easier instead of using HP45. HP45 was a horrible experience. Was bad.
Well, I'm happy to hear that it works well for you. I'm very happy to hear that.
Yeah. So, and what are your main competitors, and we heard some of the advantages here of using Snyk, but what are the main competitors of Snyk?
I think it depends on what angle you look at. I think one of the competitors definitely is GitHub. GitHub has many of the things, or part of the things that we do, integrated into their workflow already, like explaining you like what kind of vulnerable dependencies you have if you submit it to your GitHub branch or you publish it there. Obviously, with their event security thing, they have things available that are similar to our way of working. I think in some way people think that or Sonar might be a competitor a little bit, although I think that Sonar is better on the quality assurance side
Yeah.
instead of the security end because that's what they traditionally come from. And yes, they will catch a bunch of vulnerabilities as well. The other hand, I think we're better at catching security vulnerabilities instead of quality assurance stuff. So honestly, I'm using it next to each other. Probably not something that everybody wants to hear within my company. I'm using it next to each other, Sonar, and there are other few things. Like for instance, depending on what how do you say that, on what ecosystem you use. Some ecosystems have it built in. For instance, if you use npm, they already have some security scanning in npm when you try to install a certain package. I think Python has something as well, or I know that they were working on that with PI. So that is something like Docker has something internally for their Docker files, but we can do it all together as a, how do you say it, holistic view, and you have it in one platform altogether. So from some ends, we do have a bunch of competitors. I think another competitor is SamGraph, for instance, or Sonatype that do things as well. But if you look at the full package, we are focusing on security, and most other things are doing security as an add-on to what they are doing. Like for instance, GitHub started as a company that does Git repositories and publishing them. Of course, they have add-ons on that, but I think our focus has always been on security and will always be on security. And therefore, I think, how do you say that? We are focused on only doing that and doing that well for multiple ecosystems.
Yeah. So Snyk is effective on dealing with vulnerable dependencies and also to scan the code on the spot and identifying OWASP vulnerabilities, right?
Well, more or less, like we do it on different levels. So your custom code, we do static analysis on your written code, on your classes, and on your methods that you write yourself to see if there are things in there like path reversal problems, SQL injections, and all that kind of stuff. We can look into your dependencies, even if you use multiple ecosystems, like maybe you have a project that uses both npm or so JavaScript and Java. We can scan if you are importing libraries that have vulnerabilities and how to fix them, because the remediation advice is something that is very helpful. And we can even automate certain things to create automatic pull requests for you to help that. So that's a second layer that we can scan things like containers and base images to see if you're bringing in a very old base image that comes in with vulnerabilities that can cascade into other problems. We can scan your infrastructure as code. So then we're talking about Helm charts and Kubernetes files to see if there are misconfigurations in there. And then we are working on some flow analysis to see dynamic flow analysis to see if things are going wrong there. So more of the in production stuff. And we're currently working on a bunch of stuff just to look into AI-driven development, which is something that is still in development and piece by piece that will come out. But we're always focusing on security from different levels from a, how do you say that, practitioner point of view. So as a practitioner, as a developer, you need to know how to solve this. So it will always be like, hey, we found something that might lead into a vulnerable flow. How can you fix this? Or what is our advice on that? And then with that knowledge, either we can generate it for you, AI generate it for you, or create a pull request for certain things to statically change things, or you can take that up yourself, like, hey, I want to do it myself, and with the inspiration of your advice, I can figure this out. That depends on your way of working. So we don't determine how you should implement it. We give you all sorts of information, and some things can be automated, but if you choose not to, it's also fine. You can do it manually. So in very different levels of your development lifecycle, but also in very different levels of your development stack, because in most companies, probably the containers and Kubernetes is not done by core developers, but maybe by a platform team or SRE team or something like that. but we can do that. We can scan and we can help you on different levels of that, and even with some runtime analysis if you want that as well.
Amazing. So it's a complete tool to keep your
It's a
whole Java
yeah.
application or any other programming language application secure.
Yep. It's we now marketed this more like a security platform instead of a security tool. But what's in the name? In the end, it's to make sure that we as developers can operate on a more or a less frustrated way, that we don't have to wait for hours. That's our goal.
Amazing. And what strategy would you adopt to make a Java application secure?
It depends. If you start from scratch, it's easy. Is in make sure that you probably will use a framework, but start with one of the latest versions of that. Don't start with older versions and build your stuff up from there. But that's the same if you have an old application that you need to ramp up back into spec, that it's secure again. Start with what is the biggest thing that you can, where are the most vulnerabilities? Probably, first of all, if you're using Docker containers, probably you want to use to look in, okay, what kind of base image are we using? Do we need to do everything? Do we need to have a full-blown operating system as my image, or maybe we can downgrade it into a smaller one with less binaries? Update that to a later version. I would say look into your frameworks like Spring Boot or Quarkus or Halidon, whatever you're using. I don't mind that much, but upgrade that to the newer versions, because these frameworks will get updates very frequently. And what you see specifically in banks and insurance companies, it's not well maintained. It's still on an older version. So start with that. And then you probably see that you already need to do a lot of work to get all the lower libraries up to date as well. So get your libraries up to date and keep them up to date, I would say, because if something happens tomorrow, the patch will be on the newer version. And if you're 4 versions behind, good luck, because everything will fall over. So do that on your application level, and then scan both your dependency tree and your application code to see if there are vulnerabilities found, and go to them one by one to see, like, okay, what is going on here? Is this something that has a high threat or not? And try to fix it, because most of the stuff, it's not that hard. It's just making sure that there is input validation, or there is some sort of sanitization on it, or maybe, well, these scanners can help you to figure out and point out where these exact problems are. And if you are convinced that this will not harm you, you can even ignore it if you want to, which is not a recommendation, but it's a recommendation if you need to do so many things in a little amount of time, then you want to ignore certain things for a certain set of time. But I would start with has the biggest impact. That's probably your operating system layer. So your Docker container, if you can control that. Next, your framework layers and your library layers. So your dependencies. And from that point on, go into your code, because it can cascade, as in, okay, I can use something in your code to get in your system, and then I'm using a library that you have on your class path to do something else. And well, basically you're chaining the attacks into something that can actually harm you. It will never be a 1.1 hit. It will always be chaining certain things all together, and then somewhere in time it will harm you in the end. As you have worked or if you have seen the problem that Equifax had, that was basically just a library. But you have to figure out how to create that certain header to make that exploit. But if somebody publishes that for you, then everybody can replicate it. Everybody can make a script out of that and just hit you a ton of times. And now that's even getting easier with the help of generative AI that can already point you out to, hey, maybe you can do this or that. So yeah, I would start with the things that make the biggest impact and work your way down.
Amazing explanation. And as a board member of the Virtual Jug and NL Jug, what is your advice for developers who want to start their own jug? What are the main lessons you have learned from running jug?
What I would say is figure out don't start a competition with another jug if you already have something in your area. Say if there's something in your area, there is already a Java user group where Jug stands for, obviously. Don't start competition, join them and see if you can join forces. That's one thing. If there's nothing in your area, you can start it up by finding out if there are in your area a bunch of Java developers, or even if you want to make it bigger into a community, and get them together and see if you can organize simple things like a meetup to see if you can share between peers and start from there. So start your network small and build your stuff up from there. And if you are already known in other communities, try to cross over. Say you are well known in the Docker community. I'm just making things up. That is also interesting for developers. Also, like I'm making a bridge between development and security, which can be interesting for Java developers, but maybe also for, I don't know, C# developers.
Yeah.
So try to seek for collaborations and to not make your community too strict. Yes, you can say like, okay, my main focus is Java and a Java user group. If you have enough folks around that, and try to continue from there. Somebody's at my front door, as you can hear from my Alexa.
Okay.
No, but like there's somebody downstairs that will open.
Okay.
No worries. But start from there. Start from what the needs are. Figure out what the needs are, and talk to other jugs in the area. If it's not directly your area, so you're setting up something, there's probably one a little bit distant in another city or something like that. See what their problems are and see if you can create collaborations between communities. Because the bigger you grow your network, the easier it gets to get information and to get lessons and to not make the same mistake. Just what we talked about that with mentoring, not make the same mistakes in that area what other people already did. If they said like, oh, we try to do 3 meetups a month, yeah, that might not work. They say like, okay, one is something that works in this area. You're like, okay, maybe I'm doing 1 meetup a month or 1 meetup every 2 months, and listen to your community. If you're setting up it's something with a group of people, listen to the folks, what they need, what they want, and don't just do something. You can try something, but then listen to the feedback and do something with that to build and grow that community and pull them into that, not only as a listener or a participant of a meetup or a Java user group, but also ask them, okay, what did you learn? Like maybe you want to share something about that and empower people to actively contribute.
Amazing. So join forces if there is a Java user group in your area. If not, start simple, create a meetup, share your knowledge. Don't lock yourself into Java. If you are into Docker, if you are into security, microservices, or AI, you can also create a community on that. So
and you can collaborate with other communities that are already in your area to see if you can share, because that's what a community is for. It's not to gain anything specific, but to learn how to learn more people, and to make your network bigger, and to not make the same mistake that somebody else already made.
Yeah. Awesome. So there's something very interesting about you that I didn't know. So you are also a captain and executive officer in the Royal Netherlands Air Force. So can you tell me more about that? How is the experience? That sounds so cool. And obviously, like, it's a very serious position as well.
It is. What it means, like, I am next to my day job as currently a staff developer advocate or an engineer in most cases. I work as a reserve for the Royal Netherlands Air Force. During my time over the years, I grew in that thing as well. I do that, like, say, 1 to 2 days a week. For instance, in the weekends or in evenings, I spend time on that. And currently, I am the XO, which means I am the second in command of our squadron. Our squadron is around 700 people. Most of them are, all of them are reserves, and they do things like ground protection, object protection, physical protection. What I mean, they need to get trained. They need to be a certain state. They need to have passed their physicals, and everything that we do there is to help the regular military if they have any needs, help them out with either manpower or specific capabilities that a certain person has. For instance, for myself, it can be in developing software or doing something in cyber, but it can also be if somebody is in his or her civilian life, is a lawyer, might be helping in certain cases. So we help the regular Air Force out. So as a unit, one of the 2 reserve squadrons, there is a commanding officer, which is my boss, and I am basically his right hand, and I am responsible for the day-to-day operations. And it can be anything from making sure that people are trained, people get the stuff that they need, they don't have issues with, I don't know, things like payment, or their stuff is broken, or they need to get somewhere. Do they have permission for some? can be all sorts of things. So in that case, technically I am in a leadership position for my squadron, which is somewhat the lower end of the spectrum. So I'm very hands-on. I'm involved in setting up the trainings and that kind of stuff. Like how does this happen? How can we improve training so our folks are more capable of helping out the regulars? All that sort of stuff is going on there, and then there's a lot going on with the current situation in the world. Trust me.
My God, I imagine. So, do you also fly jets?
No, no, I am not allowed to fly. I am not working in the Air Force. Everybody thinks then you're a pilot. Well, that's not. They say on average, if you are, say, you're a fighter pilot or a helicopter pilot or something like that, let's say there are 100 people around that, maybe even more, to get that thing going. That can be engineers, that can be mechanics, that can be software developers. But it also means like if that thing is on an airbase, it needs to be protected. It needs to be guarded. There needs to be somebody that makes sure that the pilot gets some food. So there are cooks. It's a whole sub community within the military because if they get deployed, they need to take care of everything. If you think of that, it's like there are so many things going on. There are specialists that are there to train you on explosives and how to handle certain equipment. They are just trainers to train new people. So we need our own trainers to get people into a certain state. There are also folks available that, well, let's make things up, that is actually there. Firefighters, for instance. A plane cannot take off or land without a proper fire crew because we are not at war. But they need to train. So there needs to be a fire crew available. So we on every airfield we have firefighters available with a certain skill set that know how to rescue people. Like so, there's a multitude of people. There are multitude of functions over there that need to be done in the Air Force, and only a handful of these folks are pilots. That's a small minority.
Have you ever thought about becoming a pilot? I imagine like how cool. Like obviously, I'm talking here on my kind of ignorant side, but I imagine, wow, being a jet pilot, like
Sure.
imagine it would be amazing.
That was definitely a childhood dream to be a jet pilot, but the physical tests and the amount of people that go in and are doing that and are actually trying for that, versus the amount of people that actually become that is just a very small amount. And then in that point, I was like, okay, what other things? Like the chances to becoming a fighter pilot, then you're top of the top. Is like a Formula One driver. There are only 20 of them in the world, right? You can compare it with that. If you want to be an F-35 pilot, specifically in my country, there are just a handful of people that can do that. But there are other needs as well. And since I'm doing this as a reserve next to my day job, I just wanted to mean something for my country and do something back. And that's the reason why I became a military reserve to basically use my spare time and use my free time to give back to my own country in my way.
Nice. And if there is a war, would you have a special role?
That depends. I will have a special role that I will probably need to make first in the stuff up. I need to make sure that all my people are ready to go, and they will ask me like, okay, we need so many folks. Do you have them available? And that's already where we're working up to. But it depends. It depends also like what is the need. Maybe they say, Brian, it's all nice, but your civilian skills as a software expert and maybe your stuff in cybersecurity might be at this point more useful in our cyber command. So they might transfer me. That we don't know. That's something that if, let's say, I hope I will never find out.
Yeah, I really hope so. Really hope.
That's what was like. If something goes wrong, it's not up to me. They know what my skill set is, and it can be either or. I can go different ways.
And let's talk about books now. What books would you recommend for Java developers? It could be a personal development book or any book that you feel that it's impactful to help developers advance in their careers.
Well, definitely, we already mentioned one book that is very important, the Culture Map. I think at a certain point in time within our company, we gave that to every person that came new in the company. That doesn't matter if you're a developer or in marketing or sales or something like that. because you have to work with different kinds of people and different kinds of mindsets. So I think the culture map is definitely one of them.
Fantastic.
I think one of the other one, which is also co-written by Aaron Meyer from the culture map, is what was the? I think it's a book around Netflix. Is I think the name is No Rules. Yes, No Rules Rules. It's Netflix and the Culture of Reinvention, which is a book by Reed Hastings and Aaron Meyer, which is a really good book for yourself to read around, and just grab bits and pieces out of that you can use, for instance, in your own conversations with your manager, if you want to get higher up, or if you want to know, like, hey, am I doing a good job? Yes or no. So I would recommend that book as well.
Nice.
Obviously, from a Java perspective, I liked like one of my Bibles is the book by Joshua Blog. That was definitely one of the ones that I read front to back and back again. Don't even I'm not
Effective Java.
Effective Java. Yes, that one. I was not recalling the
It's a
title, but
classic.
the one for, and well, there are a bunch of books as well. But I think these three, like that one on effective Java, is for Java developers. Technically, is really one you should read, and the other one on the other two on personal development will help you out to be a better person, and maybe even get you into a certain state while you understand what to do to get a promotion or to get higher up or to find out what people thinking, because it's like getting a promotion is not a straightforward thing. It's not like if you do that you will get it. No, of course that's not how it works. So you need to navigate a little bit of politics, you need to navigate a little bit of culture and how things work. And I think these two books that I mentioned, the No Rules and the Culture Map, are my go-to books, and I read them multiple times. And every now once in a while, just grab it back and just like, okay, how did they say that, and then read it again. So these two are my go-tos.
Amazing. I never read these No Rules, but for me, it's an amazing book because I'm a mentor and I help developers advance their career. So to have this extra knowledge will definitely help me to
The
act
only
that.
thing I want the only thing I want to say about No Rules is about how Netflix implemented certain things, how they did that. But doesn't mean it works the same way as you, because it's a whole different company. It's a big company, but you can still bits and pieces out of that you can use in your day-to-day job. And there are a bunch of tips in there that you can use. And that doesn't
Amazing.
matter if you're a developer, other technical expert, or even in a whole different branch. I think it's genuinely a very interesting read for, well, development growth, or how do you say that? Career growth.
Awesome. So, Brian, and what is your most important career golden lesson, let's say like that, for Java developers?
Oof. For me, and that's a personal thing, is stay connected with people,
Nice.
because there are always, like, you will never be a master in everything, but
Impossible.
it's impossible. Also, don't try to be, like, try to find your thing you're good at, but have a strong network of technical specialists around you that you can ask for help, and that will help you, because things change fast, things change sometimes dramatically. And if I need to know something about a specific topic, I will go to that person, like, hey, I'm struggling. Obviously, I'm researching it first myself, and then you're
Sure.
probably at some point like, I don't know how to do this, or why should I use this? Go talk to these people. Most people in our community, specifically in the Java community, are open and helpful. If they are a well-known speaker or just your other developer around the corner that you saw at a meetup, connect with them, talk to them, share your problems, and maybe they come up like, oh, we have the same problem, we solved it this way, and you're like, that's a great idea. So that can give you that step, that one puzzle piece to help you in your next challenge for everything. And the bigger your network in that case is, so build that network of like-minded people in that space. They might even come up to you with job offers. That happened to me. I'm the living example of that, because they know you. They're like, okay, you're a invested programmer, you're an invested developer, you know a lot about this specific. We're looking for somebody in our team. Maybe they come up to you, but that only works if you build up that network and you have these people close and connected with you. So
Amazing.
I think community, come back to community, I guess, but make that for yourself. You have a network, create a network, talk to people.
Yeah, and this advice is also very valuable inside the company because I have many mentees of mine who are senior developers, and sometimes they struggle with that because they are kind of reluctant to ask questions to other developers. And it could be ego, it could be kind of fear of being judged by others. There are some things behind the scenes, right? But it's very important to develop this ability to humble yourself and ask questions. Obviously, I'm not saying that you should ask questions for any problem, because like you said, you research first, you see if you can figure this out on your own. But if things, like if you take many hours to solve this issue, solve this problem, then it's a lot easier to just ask.
True. Absolutely true. In some cases, just ask, or not even to ask how to do it, but why. In some cases, the why is just as important because that makes you understand on a bit of a deeper level why you should do this, not because Stack Overflow or ChatGPT told me so, and it magically worked. But if you know the why, or maybe challenge somebody like, hey, I've seen this, I've seen that, what is the best solution? And they can give you more insights on that so you actually understand what you're doing. Because one day or another, you will have to face that thing again with a memory leak or with a certain decision. Why did we go that way? And then at least you know why you did this instead of saying, well, I read this on a blog post and I just copy pasted it, right?
Yeah, like it's a lot more useful for developers to know the problem, right? That's the first step, and know why you are doing that thing. Like not just get a solution, say, hey, okay, let's do that, and not to know even why.
True.
Awesome. Brian, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your insights. I learned a lot from you, and I'm sure that the Java Challengers audience also learned a lot from you. And I could appreciate that you could share your insights, your career insights, and hopefully I'm gonna meet you again around the world in a conference.
We will see, Rafael. But thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Brian. So I'll
right.
see you now. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.